find a podcast or, find blog articles that are relevant to your industry.
Hey everybody, this is Morgan J. Ingram here, host of the SDR Chronicles, bringing you sales development practitioners, sales development leaders, sales leaders, even have marketers on here sometimes as well, to provide you guys valuable insights for your career, wherever you're trying to go in your life in the sales development or sales community. And so today I have here Jeremy. We have talked a multitude of times back and forth on LinkedIn, and he has told me that he has some valuable nuggets for you guys today. And the topic is how to immerse yourself in your industry knowledge. And so I talked about this a ton of times on how you need to be speaking the same language as your prospects, or your prospects won't really recognize you and they won't listen to you. So without any further ado, I'm gonna let Jeremy kind of introduce himself as we go into the topic of the day.
Yeah, so it's great to be here, Morgan. Thanks a lot for having me on. I've been a follower for a long time now, and we've been chatting for a while, so it's great to be here. I'm with Navisite. My name is Jeremy Levier. I am a channel sales manager with Navisite. So just about 6-7 weeks ago, I got promoted from the BDR role. It's called a BDR here at Navisite. Obviously, BDR, SDR is the same thing. And I was a BDR at Navisite for about 13 months. And took me 4 months before I started to hit my number as a BDR. And then I hit my quota 9 months in a row. So I was able to just get some traction and get in the flow of it. And one of those months, last October, I actually had 246% to quota as a BDR. The meetings that we were supposed to get was 15 in a month that were set and also held. And I had 37 that month. 21 of them converted to opportunities within that same fiscal month. So that was when I started to realize, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm doing pretty good at this, and just kind of rode that and kept improving at my craft and learning and getting better. And now I'm in a new channel manager role. So it's been really exciting with a lot of new stuff to learn. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And so this is a topic that you were very passionate about. And so talk about, how does one immerse themselves in their industry when they're just starting out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in the beginning, when you're starting out as an SDR, it's important to not get too overwhelmed. You could just get really overwhelmed by trying to learn everything there is to know about your industry and about who your buyer is and about your product. I think it's important to, when you're first starting out, just take little pieces here and there. Learn a little bit here and there. Don't try to learn everything in one day. You'll get overwhelmed. I think first 2 to 4 months as an SDR, I think that's your ramp time, when you should take 2 to 4 months to really start to get acclimated and really start to feel confident on the phone. Know who your buyer is, who your ideal customer profile is, why that buyer should care, and get that messaging down and get good at being on the phone and making those calls and booking meetings in the beginning. And in order to do that, you have to really know your buyer and what makes them tick and why would they care? What is that messaging that is actually going to resonate with them, and actually get them to want to take that meeting. So, you can't just call them up and just spit out features and benefits. You can't product dump. So a lot of it is really knowing your product and your industry, but you have to be able to turn that into something conversational that you can interact with them about. So, when you're first starting out, you want to learn a lot, but I think it's that next level. Once you've been in the role for 2 to 4 months, then you really start to get a better idea of, really immersing yourself in your industry and becoming, an expert on whatever you're doing. So that your industry and your product, people look at you as one of the experts in it, and you feel like, after you've been in the role for maybe 6 months, you actually feel like you're an expert in what you're doing. Because I'm sure you did, Morgan. After a few months, you felt like you were an expert in ABM. You know, when I first started Navisite, I didn't even know what cloud computing was. I heard you mentioned before, you didn't even know what ABM was when you started. You know, it was just learning a little bit. And then it's like all of a sudden 4-6 months later, you're like, wow, I'm an expert at this. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. You can't get overwhelmed with it. You just have to take little pieces at a time.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because if you understand what the product knowledge and the industry, then you're going to be able to articulate better value. So talk about why it's important to be learning about your industry every single day. There's a lot of things that you talked about there, but that's something I really want to talk about first.
Yeah. So, you know, you really have to learn a little bit every single day, and, you know, actionable things. So what should you actually be doing? You know, podcasts, blogs, you know, reading books. I know you're a huge fan of reading books and reading a book a week. But especially, I'm a really big fan of podcasts. You know, so find a podcast, or, you know, find blog articles that are relevant to your industry. You know, so like for me, for example, in IT, cloud computing, disaster recovery, Office 365, things like that. The podcast that I was able to really gain a lot of knowledge from it's called CXO Talk. And it's funny, I actually only even knew about this podcast because I wrote a blog article that was actually more related to sales, and Jill Rowley commented on it and said, hey, you know, if you want to really know your buyer and you're selling to CIOs and IT directors, check out this podcast, CXO Talk. So I checked it out, and I'm able to really get in the world of the CIO, you know. So I would start by, you know, watching one of those podcasts every day, or if not once a week, you know. So find out what are those websites, you know, what are those websites that people who are in the know, who are the top 50 or top 100 most influential people in your space, you know, where are they? You know, what websites are they visiting to read articles, and what podcasts are they watching? That's what you should be starting to learn, at least taking in some of that content at least once a day, if not at least once a week.
Cool. And then with that, the podcasts and articles that you're finding, are you Google searching those? Are you looking through LinkedIn? And then you said once a week. Is that before work, after work, during work? What kind of were the best times for you, and how did you kind of work that in your schedule?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm as an SDR or BDR, I was obviously on LinkedIn like pretty much all day. You know, I mean, LinkedIn and Salesforce. At any given time when I was a BDR, I had dual monitors, and I had like 10 Salesforce tabs open and 10 LinkedIn tabs open. So, you know, anytime I call a prospect, I would be on their LinkedIn profile. You know, so I'm just consuming LinkedIn on a daily basis throughout the course of the day. So content just kind of flows through my LinkedIn feed. And one thing that was really helpful to me is that eventually it got to the point where instead of my LinkedIn feed just being coworkers or people that I used to work with or my old college buddies or something, and then it got to the point of after a few months where I'm scrolling through my LinkedIn feed and it's all my prospects and, you know, thought leaders and experts in my industry. And I'm seeing all of them post content, and then I'm reading a lot of that content. So it's more relevant to me, you know, because anytime I called a prospect, I'd be on their LinkedIn profile and I would click follow, so that now they're coming up in my news feed. Anything that they share, I'm reading that content. So that's kind of some of the basis for some of the content that I would see, because I'm following all the CIOs. What are they commenting on? What kind of articles are they commenting on? Maybe join some LinkedIn groups that they're in. I'm in like 20 different LinkedIn groups, all related to IT, disaster recovery, cloud computing. And I'm going in there and reading articles that are posted in those groups, and connecting with the thought leaders in IT and CIOs. And you just eventually kind of get a landscape, an idea of the different blogs and podcasts to be taking in, what content you should be reading. And, you know, like I said, LinkedIn is huge for me to be able to come across that relevant content.
And with that relevant content you're coming across, you said you were connecting directly with these people, or you would just share their content?
A little bit of both. So, I would share the content and tag the person in it, whoever wrote the content. But also at the same time, if it was a prospect, somebody that I was prospecting into, one strategy that I would use a lot of times as a BDR would be to follow them. And then I wouldn't just connect with them right away. I know that, you don't want to just like connect with somebody right away. And then as soon as they accept the connection request, you send them like a LinkedIn message, like with a sales pitch. That's definitely what you don't want to do. But one strategy that I did, I was following a CIO on LinkedIn and Twitter, and just liking and commenting on his tweets. He was posting all these like photography pictures that, he was really into photography. So, I just was able to kind of break through the noise by connecting with him on something that he's actually interested in, not even related to technology. And then eventually that was able to start a business conversation. And I was able to book a really good meeting through that. So, I was kind of following him on LinkedIn and Twitter, engaging with his content for maybe a couple of weeks. Then after I'd built some familiarity, then I connected with him on LinkedIn. And then, after following him and commenting, engaging with his content a little bit more, then I was able to open up a business conversation. But it definitely takes time. You don't want to try to, go too fast with it, and then you might overwhelm your prospects.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to overwhelm your prospects. So with the research that you've done, did you find that the people you're reaching out to were more receptive? Did they appreciate the time that you took and actually listen to these podcasts?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I feel like I'm adding value to them. People always say, add value, and like, what does that mean? It's becoming like this buzzword that's losing meaning. But one thing that I would do, I find myself doing, is I would take information that I'm finding in these podcasts. Like there was an episode of CXO Talk that featured David Chow. He's one of the biggest, most well-known CIOs in the whole country. And he's a healthcare CIO. So there was all of this information about artificial intelligence and value-based healthcare and population health, this stuff that is like cutting edge, that's just coming out now in healthcare. And I was able to formulate that in a message to an IT director for a hospital. And it was relevant to him, and he was like, it resonated with him. He replied back right away. It was like, wow, yeah, that's actually exactly what we're hoping to do here. And it was able to start a business conversation that now is involving what my company is able to do for him.
That's awesome. And so what have been like what's been the best type of feedback that you've gotten? And then what was like times where you didn't do this research and you realized that this was the time for you to switch to actually digesting content?
Yeah. So, I think like anytime you're on a call and you don't know what that reason is. Like my company did some training with JBarrows. I know you're a big fan of John, and he said, if you can't answer the question when you're on a call with a prospect, the reason for my call is blank. What is that? Fill in the blank. It can't just be, checking in, touching base. It can't just be, reason for my call is my product does blah, blah, blah. You need to really have it be value driven and based on, and it's got to be buyer centric. And if you can't fill in that blank with something that really resonates with them, maybe you got to do more research on your buyer, or you need to immerse yourself in more content that is relevant to your buyer so that you'll be able to speak their language. You'll know what their challenges are and what's important to them. So I have had quite a few calls where I've actually dialed the phone and then they answer, because when you're a BDR, SDR, 80-90% of the times you get voicemails. So we've all had those times when they
becomes a very.
I didn't think it was going to pick up that time. Yeah. So you're like thrown off. And then I'm like, wait, the reason my call is, what's the blank? I didn't think he was going to answer. So that's when you got to always be able to fill in that blank with something that's value driven for that prospect.
And the podcasts and the information, the blogs, those all help.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, because you're able to make it relevant to them because you're up on the latest news. the latest and greatest, what is going on in their world. And you wouldn't know that, you wouldn't be on of what is going on in that industry unless you're staying up and you're learning every single day. Yeah,
you have to be. And I'm curious to know, so you talked about connecting with those individuals. When you connect with those individuals, obviously they're probably thinking they're gonna, you're gonna sell them something. Do you just generally just like ask for like 15 minutes of their time to like just actually learn more and not actually sell them anything?
I try to ease into it, I think a lot of people, send people messages or email and it just sounds like this generic sales pitch. I try to, ease into the conversation and make it personalized for them, and make it based on what their challenges might be. And I'll ask for a meeting at the end of the message, but the body of the message is really, hey, I was doing research on your company and I came across some content that I thought might be helpful to you. Here's some specific things from this article that I thought might relate to what is going on in your industry. And I was wondering if we could talk about it. It's something that might trigger a result that a more positive response from the prospect.
Yeah, and that's obviously overall what you want. And so have you gotten any, I guess this is something that's interesting. So based off the content that you learn, do you create your own content or do you just share that content throughout your network as a sales professional?
Yeah, I mean, I do a combination of both, I think in the beginning, you're asking about what SDRs right starting out in their role can be doing.
Right.
I think the first like 2 to 4 months as you're getting ramped up, find relevant content for your buyers and share it, definitely do that in the beginning. But in your first 2 to 4 months, you probably don't have the knowledge base, to really be able to actually be creating content. So, after maybe 4, 6, maybe 6 to 9 months, then you've been in the role long enough, you might actually feel like you're an expert in your industry and your technology. You might feel like you're an expert into it, and you've been absorbing so much content and connecting and following different thought leaders and experts in your space. So at that point, you can create some content. And one blog post that I wrote, it was actually the first one that I wrote that was more about technology and cloud computing as opposed to just like sales, it was based on a CXO Talk episode. So I watched this episode and it featured 4 technology thought leaders, and the host is Michael Krigsman. He's a industry thought leader. And it had the CIO for the FCC, David Bray. There's this thing called the top 100 most social CIOs. I didn't even know it was that thing until a few months ago. I'm like, wow. And some of these CIOs have like over 6,000 tweets. So I quoted each of these thought leaders. So it wasn't necessarily me being a thought leader. I was quoting the people who had worked, who had been in the industry for 10, 15 years and achieved and accomplished all of this. So I was quoting them. And in doing so, I was able to make it seem like I knew what I was talking about. And I credited them and tagged them in the post, and they all shared it and liked it. And David Bray actually commented tagging like 20 other people. So it kind of was able to spread that way. But then, I'm seen as one of them, as, I'm connecting on their level, as opposed to someone that doesn't know what I'm talking about. You kind of are able to start to build that credibility.
Yeah. And also kind of going into that, what have you found to be the best method of outreach as you learn that information? Is it straight through social, connecting with someone? Is it the phone? Is it email, or a mixture of all of those?
Yeah, so I think in the beginning, being a BDR, SDR, I believe that there's so much noise out there about social selling and social selling versus cold calling. In the beginning, I think that BDRs and SDRs should just focus on getting really good on the phone. Make your calls, know who your target prospect is and why they should care, and get really good at talking to those people on the phone and booking meetings. The social selling stuff will come later. You can get good at, connecting with prospects on LinkedIn and stuff, crafting emails later on. But you'll know more about what type of content to share and create after you've been in the role for a while and you've immersed yourself in the technology and in the industry more. In the beginning, though, I think just focus on the phone. By the end of when I was a BDR and I learned a lot and got more ramped up, I was making probably 50 calls a day and 25 emails a day. But I was doing quite a bit on social. Even at that point, though, I was only getting like maybe 2 to 4 appointments, meetings per month, just through social selling. So the phone is still was always the best friend.
Phone is always going to be the best friend.
An integrated approach of all three.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's crucial. You have to be multi-channel, especially today. So for an SDR or sales professional, sales leader, even to this degree, if they're looking to gain information and they don't know where to go and they're not getting it provided by their company, what should they be doing to become more relevant in their industry?
Yeah, I mean, just think about who are the thought leaders, who are the experts, who are like the top 50 or 100 people in your industry, in your space. And, if you're not sure, look up content on LinkedIn, do a Google search, cloud computing thought leaders. Number 1 is David Linthicum. And, it says that right on his profile. And, you just use Google, Google and LinkedIn. In 2017, you can find pretty much anything on the internet these days, and find who those thought leaders are, look at what content they're creating and sharing, absorb it, and just take a little bit of that every single day in order to get better. Find who those people are, follow them, connect with them. I'm connected with all these thought leaders like David Linthicum and Martha Heller, who writes all these books for CIOs. And following their content has been super helpful for me. One of the most helpful podcasts on CXO Talk was one featuring Martha Heller. After that episode, I was like, wow, it's a completely different conversation now that I have the ability to have with a CIO based on that 45-minute podcast that I watched. So just find that content, and you can't obviously rely on your leadership to present that content for you. You have to be proactive. You got to seek it out and go get it in order to get yourself better. Awesome.
Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the SDR Chronicles today. Love hearing about how to immerse yourself in the industry, the tactics, the strategies, why it's important. The number 1 question, as you already probably know, that I ask every single person that gets on this show at the end of the day, what is the number 1 piece of advice that you have for SDRs as they enter into their new role?
I would say the number 1 thing is to get more comfortable at just talking to people in person, over the phone, just engage with people out in the real world, talk to people at the grocery store, in the post office. I mean, these days in 2017, people are just so looking at their phones all the time that people don't really interact with each other as much. So I find a lot of SDRs and BDRs, especially when they're starting out, aren't as good just talking to people and have it be like a natural, organic, conversation. And so being able to do that in the real world and take that comfort level, talking to people into what you're doing as an SDR or BDR, into your role, being that comfortable on the phone, talking to prospects, talking to strangers, that's the number 1 thing I would say to do. You do that and you'll be on your way.
There you go. Well, Jeremy, thanks so much for the great insight. As I always say, guys, keep dialing and I'll see you guys soon.